Welcome everybody. My name is Jos Bergman and I'm working for Technology2Enjoy as a PeopleSoft consultant, and I would like to give you a short demo on simplified analytics in PeopleSoft. What is simplified analytics? With simplified analytics, users can create their own reports based on existing pivot grids, which act as a template. Users can select fields, modify prompts, change the layout, and drag and drop fields in the pivot grid. If you want to enable simplified analytics for a component, you can do so by opening up the related content services page on the People tools. In this example, I've opened up the content reference for the supplier watchlist tile. And you can see here that the service ID analytic service is associated to the page used by the tile. And in that way, you can enable simplified analytics for a page. And when you link the service ID to the page, the system will also prompt you to select a pivot grid, which the user can select when he wants to create a report. And we will see how that all works in the live demo in a moment. In the live demo, we will be creating a report. We will select the fields we want to see on the report. We're going to drag and drop fields in the pivot grid, which is standard functionality within fluid pivot grids. And we're going to review the layout options to personalize the report. Let's log into PeopleSoft, and then we're going to start with the demo. I'm going to go to the home page for procurement operations, and I'm going to open up the supplier watchlist tile. Now, on the right side of the page, you'll see a related information bar, which has a button, Add Analytics. This is how you create an analytic report. The bar is actually expanded or collapsed depending on the size of your browser viewing size. So if I increase the size of my browser view size to 90%, the bar will be collapsed, and you can open the bar by clicking on the panel button here, and then the bar will expand. In this, I'm going to reduce my browser viewing size again back to 80%. So then the bar is expanded permanently. So let's create a report by clicking on the button Add Analytics. You can see that it opens up the page called Create Analytics, and here we can actually, as a user, select the pivot grids that we want to create a report for. These are the pivot grids that are associated to the page. These are pivot grids that are written in demo, but you can also associate your own pivot grids to a particular page. And we have a couple of pivot grids to select, which we can choose from. In this case, I'm going to choose the pivot grid overall score trend, which shows us the satisfaction scores for our suppliers. For example, in the case that users have filled out survey requests or surveys to rate the suppliers that they work with, and this pivot grid shows us the overall satisfaction scores for our suppliers. We can include a chart in the report. It's set to yes, and we can also include a table containing the rows of data returned by the pivot grid. It's also set to yes. We can also choose to use a pivot grid, but then the table with the data will be set to no, as you can see, because you cannot have both. Either you have a chart with a pivot grid or a chart with a table. The pivot grid will be displayed above the chart, and within the pivot grid you can open up the folders and that will return the data. But in this example, I'm going to choose the option chart and a table below the chart with the rows of data returned by the pivot grid. I'm going to give it a name, the report, overall satisfaction, satisfaction suppliers. And I'm going to press next. And then here we can enter our set ID. And then here, oh, one moment, please. And then here, I'm going to, one moment here, let me just go back. Oh, something went wrong here. I got an error message. Let me just do it again. One moment. You see this always happens when you give a live demo. Let me do it again. I guess this is the caching in my system, in my browser probably. Overall supplier satisfaction. So, and hit next again. And then here we put in share. And let's see, let's choose a couple of fields that we want to see on the report. Let's put in the evaluation ID, the evaluation, the supplier. We can put in the template. Let's take out the version we don't need, calendar we don't need, but we would like to see the year and period. And we can take out the end date and the score we want to see. And I'm also going to choose the start and end date as editable fields so that we can also, when we run the report, we can choose a date selection for the rows returned. And let me go to next. And now the system will create the analytical report. As you can see, it builds up the fluid pivot grid very nicely. And you can see that on the y-axis we have the score, the satisfaction score for the suppliers, and on the x-axis, so on the y-axis we have the score, and on the x-axis we have the evaluation ID, and on the left in the legend we see the suppliers with their colors, and then we can know which evaluation form belongs to which vendor by looking at the colors. Let's say we're not very happy with this. Let's say we want to see the result based on year instead of evaluation ID, because this is a bit unpractical because there's so many evaluation IDs to select from. So what we're going to do, we're going to, on the left side, we see the fields that we selected in the report, and we will drag the year field to the rows section here of the report. And now you see that the fluid pivot grid has readapted itself to include the year on the x-axis, and the score is still on the y-axis. And we have the supplier as a series. So here we see that we see the satisfaction scores again of the respective suppliers and their colors. So we see, for example, this light blue color is for the supplier B&C Solutions, and they have in 2016 they had a score of a satisfaction score of 75%. Let's say we want to see the evaluation forms returned for this supplier. If we want to see those, we can click on the bar, and then we click on Detail View, and then the system will return only the evaluation IDs for evaluation forms for that particular supplier for that year. So we see here that for the vendor BNC Solutions, there were 2 surveys being returned, filled out, and one was for period 3 and one was for period 4, and you see their scores and the evaluation ID you see as well. And then a feature within Fluid a feature within the Fluid pivot grids is that you can introduce related actions. So when I click on the related action, I can actually open up that particular survey that was filled out, the evaluation form. So I will open it, evaluation details, and here we see the drill down to the actual evaluation form. And you see that we had, 3 people have filled out the form, and here we see the questions that were being asked in the survey. Products are delivered in the correct quantities. There was a score given of 80%, and also questions like products are packaged and labeled correctly. An overall score was given of 90%. This particular feature is part of a supplier scorecarding, and I will also be giving a demo on supplier scorecarding. I will also create a video about supplier scorecarding in the near future as well. So now basically we have created our report, and we can also, for example, let's say we want to filter the data. Before I forget, you can also change the line chart. So you can also do a horizontal chart and a chart like this, and this is a vertical chart, and over a horizontal chart and a bar chart, you can also change those. On the left side, you can also filter the data. For example, let's say we only want to see the surveys returned for 2018, and then we see only 2018. Let's also include 2017, 2 years of data. And let's say that we only want to see for example, we only want to see the surveys returned for period August and February. And in that way, you can filter your data depending on the filters that you select. We can clear the filters by clicking on Clear All. That will remove all the filters. And let's say that we're happy with the report. We're happy with the report as it is now. We like this. We like what we created so far. So I can now save the report, and the report is now saved. And I can also publish the report to the related information bar for the other users, so that other users also see this report under their related information bar. The related information bar here, they see it appearing then as well under their own. Let me cancel out. So I've saved the report. So now I'm going to close it. And then you see underneath the related information bar, you see that we now have a hyperlink to our report that we just created, overall supplier satisfaction. Let's open up the report again by clicking on the hyperlink. And here we see the report again. And on the left side, we can now also select the start and end date. remember when we created the report, we had selected the editable fields start and end date. And now these fields are appearing in the report when you open it again. So you can now also filter the data based on start and end date here and here. And so the prompts are now appearing. You can also select the supplier ID and a particular evaluation template as a prompt. We see an edit box appearing, so you can also go back to the to edit the report. To if I click on edit, we can actually go back through the steps that we just did when we first created the report. Let me close this and let me go back. We can also now click on the options menu here on the right upper side, and we can view the pivot grid in the background. This is the actual pivot grid, and we can expand the folders by clicking on all, and in that way you can expand. If you click on expand supplier all, then you see the pivot grid expanding all the data into brackets, into categories. So that's also possible. We can also update the filters. We can remove and add filters to the report. We can also open up the chart options, and here we can enter a title for the report, a subtitle, and we can also enter a footer, which is a piece of text that will appear below the chart. We can also change the title of the x-axis and the title of the y-axis, and we can also change the x-axis here to another field. The y-axis only has one in this example, but you can also have multiple y-axis if you set up the pivot grid like that. We can change the series from supplier to another field if we want to. We can also change the bar chart. We can also introduce a pie chart or a 3D chart. Here you have a 3D bar chart or 2D. And we can also choose if we want to have the legend, which you see here, if we want to have it on the left or at some other place in the report, in the chart. Click on cancel. We can also export the data to Excel, and we can also introduce threshold options. And let me open that. Let's say that we want to be notified when the satisfaction scores for our suppliers are going below the 50%, and that we want to be notified when it goes below 50%. So what we can do is we can put in a threshold, and we just put in a distinct, and we say 50%. And for 50%, and make it a red color. And threshold criteria is then less than 50%. We want to be notified, and the alert type we want to be notified. You can choose mail, push, both, or none. Let's say we want to be notified by push notification and by mail, so we will choose both, and then hit apply. We also have to select the recurrence, but I'm not going to discuss that in this particular video. But you also have to select the recurrence as well. Now you can read about it in the people books if you want to, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that. But when you click apply now, the system will basically show a red line, which is the threshold. So if it goes below 50%, you will be notified by push notification. So let's say at this point, let me see here. So we have our data here below the chart, and so we've basically created a very nice report. And let's say, so at this point we can also save the report. We can save it as a personalization, the current layout, saving it. And you can also save it as a different layout. So you can have multiple versions of the same report with different layouts and save them with different names if you want to, by giving every layout a different name. In this case, I'm just going to save it. Personalizations are saved. And now I can basically close the report again. And then, for example, suppose you want to delete the report that you just created. You can, on the related information bar, you have an options menu here. And here you can basically choose if you want to display it or if you want to show the report as a tile. But you can also delete it. Let me just delete it now. And delete. And hit save. And now basically the report that we just created is gone. And this basically shows you the functionality of simplified analytics and how it works in a brief video. And it also uses the standard functionality of fluid pivot grids. So much of the functionality you have seen in the fluid pivot grid is standard functionality within fluid pivot grids. And the simplified analytics works together with fluid pivot grids. And you can also read more about it in the People books. It's quite well documented and it's interesting to read. And that concludes this video about simplified analytics.